What's going on, guys? White Fox 1225 here with another video. So today we have another video on Far Cry Primal. So this weekend we got some news, a couple of announcements, and then we also got a 2-hour live stream which I watched. So figured in this video I just sum up everything. I watched the whole live stream. So instead of you having to sit through that, I figured I'd give you all the news and everything we learned. So we got some stuff on gameplay, the story, we got to look at the map and the landscape. So we'll be going over all that and everything you need to know. So let's start off with the gameplay. So first off, they made an announcement that there will be no multiplayer or co-op in Far Cry Primal, which I think is a good idea because honestly I never liked the co-op and I never liked the multiplayer at all. Thought the multiplayer was kind of thrown in at the last minute and they really didn't put enough time into it to make it good, so they might as well put that effort into the single player and making that as good as it could be. So there will be no multiplayer or co-op in this one. That doesn't mean there won't be in the future ones, but at least for Primal it'll be exclusively single player. Now in the gameplay demo, we saw him tame some animals, which we already knew you could do from that, a little demo we got earlier. And if you guys didn't know that, you can go back and watch one of my previous videos on Far Cry Primal where I talk about taming animals, and I'll put a link in the description to that. But you can tame animals, so we saw him tame like a cave bear and a couple of saber-tooths, and we learned that you can ride the bears, you can ride the saber-tooths, and you can ride the mammoths. So you'll be able to ride all those animals in the games, and just those. So animals also can't die, they can just go down, but you can always resurrect them, so it's not like your animal is going to be dead. However, if he does take enough damage, he will go down, kind of like your companions in Fallout 4 or Skyrim or something like that. Another really cool gameplay aspect is that you can now light any weapon on fire, which is pretty cool, and you can also throw any weapon. So even a club or something like that, you can light that on fire and throw it. And fire is actually a pretty useful weapon. You can just use a torch and animals will avoid fire like they naturally would in primitive times. And you can also light animals on fire and people on fire. And also in the gameplay demo, we saw him go into this like outpost, and he was just flinging fire arrows and lighting little huts on fire. It was pretty cool to watch. So fire is definitely a bigger part of this game than any game in the past, and it's pretty cool to see it used, especially at night. Another gameplay thing that we saw coming is Hunter's Vision, which lets you see animals, and you can also see the tracks of animals, and then they leave, so you can kind of stalk them. We've seen that in the Far Cry games before, but this isn't going to be a potion. It's just an ability that you have. Now the Grappling Hook, or whatever you want to call it, is coming back to this game. I think they called it a Grappling Claw, but it's essentially the same as Far Cry 4. The only thing different in this game is that there's going to be a little cave painting wherever you can use, the Grappling Hook. So it's a little more of an indication of where you can use it, which I thought was kind of nice. So that's pretty much all we learned about the gameplay, but honestly the more we hear about the gameplay, the more I think it's going to be really cool, and I'm actually thinking the Primal setting was a really great idea to switch things up, and just seeing the demo made me pretty excited. But let's take a second and move on to the landscape and the world and the graphics and all that stuff. So during the demo we got a pretty good look at the world and the map and the graphics, and I have to say it looks completely beautiful. The setting kind of has this feel of untouched nature and kind of the land before humanity, and the trees are massive. The world just feels like massive. That's a pretty good way to describe it. Everything looks huge. The cliffs are huge compared to other Far Cry games, and it just looks, I don't know, completely beautiful. And all the Far Cry settings are great, but I think this one definitely takes the cake. Like Far Cry 4, there's going to be a lot of biomes, so there's going to be like some rocky places, some snowy places, some really green places, maybe even some deserts, so definitely a bunch of variety there, kind of like Far Cry 4 again, because it's kind of similar, but since this is after the Ice Age, there's like some glaciers, so there's definitely a lot of variety there. We also learned that the map is going to be about the same size as Far Cry 4, which I think is good, so not too much bigger, not too much smaller, around the same. The game will have a natural day and night cycle, and depending on when you attack an outpost, depending whether it's day or night, gameplay is going to change, not only with the darkness, but also, some of your enemies will be sleeping at night, so definitely going to have to plan things out with the day and night, because if you attack at night, maybe stealth is a better option, or day, maybe you just want to go all out, so definitely some planning, and it's cool that it has like a full cycle. That's pretty good, kind of expected, but the night does look pretty cool in this game. Lastly, let's go into the story. So one thing, the story did get an M rating officially, and that's because it has some torture and nudity, which the torture part seems pretty cool. They describe some scenes in the rating because you can always read like why they rated it a certain way, and some of the scenes sounded pretty brutal, so pretty excited for that. And you know, the story kind of is the same, but we got a little bit more details during the live stream. You're part of the Wenja people, and when you get to, you know, this land that you're in, you know, you find out that your people are all scattered. So basically throughout the story you're going to be trying to unite your people again and, you know, take over the land. But that's kind of a rough outline. I'm sure the story will be a little deeper than that. But you're going to be fighting against two other tribes that, you know, also vie for land, and you're going to be fighting against them. One's a little bit more primitive and one's a little bit more advanced. Another cool thing, they did create a unique language for this game. So they studied some ancient languages, ancient European and African languages, and they kind of just made a language for this game that, you know, they think could have been used, or kind of sounds like it could have been used in primitive times, which is pretty awesome. Now, don't worry, there will be subtitles for like cutscenes and stuff, but when you're running around the world and people say stuff, there won't be subtitles. And I actually think that's a pretty good idea, just because, I don't know, it kind of gets you into the feel of the game, and I feel like eventually you're going to pick up parts of the language, which is kind of cool. And just by tone and mood, you can usually tell what people are meaning. So it's really awesome that they, you know, made their own language, and definitely took some time to put that in for the story and the setting. I think that's really great. So that's pretty much everything we learned. Stay tuned for more Far Cry Primal news, and news on other RPGs, MMOs, and shooters and stuff like that. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You can check out my Instagram and Twitter in the description below. As always guys, thanks for watching. It means the world to me, and I'll see you in the next one.